Peace and blessings, people. Welcome back to the channel once again, where we talk about all things health and healing from a holistic perspective. And today will be no different. Today, we're going to be talking about the 7 warning signs that you have a vitamin D deficiency, and also why it's so important that we know and understand that deficiencies lead to dis-ease or disease or chronic illnesses in our bodies. Okay, quite often the way that we look at deficiencies are, oh, this is just a minor thing. I'll get to it when I get to it. But a lot of those deficiencies are actually causing the dis-ease in your body. I'll give you an example of a few deficiencies that literally could lead to you either losing your health or losing your life. All right, so a condition like pellagra, which is a vitamin B deficiency, a condition like that could lead to you literally going mentally insane. Okay, a vitamin C deficiency, which was very sort of common back in the days when sailors would take to the oceans on these long voyages, and they would get scurvy, and in many cases it could be fatal. Okay, so they figured out, hey, we can get vitamin C from citrus fruits, so they started adding citrus fruits to their voyages, and voila, the scurvy goes away. Okay, so it's important to know and understand deficiencies lead to dis-ease and even can lead to you losing your life. Okay, now the reason why I'm bringing that up is because that's not really what's taught in modern medicine. But what I'm trying to help you understand is quite often when we are attempting to treat a dis-ease, a high blood pressure with a high blood pressure medication, diabetes with something to regulate your blood sugars. Quite often, the issue you have, which is the actual cause, could be a deficiency. Okay, so it's important that when you go into your doctor and you get those annual results back and you see that your vitamin D levels are low or any other deficiencies are low, you really have to address it. Okay, and the best way to address it is through lifestyle and is food as medicine. Okay, so that's what we're going to be jumping into today. Now, the other thing I think is really important for us to sort of address is that we are sun people. Okay, and what I mean by that is that we as a human species developed around the equator of Earth. Okay, primarily we started in Africa and then around the equator in places like the Caribbean and places like that. So we grew, developed, and evolved around those areas, which means that the equator is the primary part of the Earth that gets the most amount of sun. Now, the reason why that's so important is because as we grow, evolve, and develop in those areas, our bodies are going to become adapted to having that amount of sun. Okay, so it's going to become adapted to being exposed to tropical weather. Now, the reason why that's so important, especially for people like myself who are darker complected, is that this melanin was developed partly as a method of reflecting some of the sunlight. Okay, so it reflects some of that sunlight, which means that now I need even more sunlight as a result because I'm reflecting some of it, especially now that many African Americans are now above the equator. Okay, because we live here in the US. All right, so we're above that tropical line that we grew, developed, and evolved around. So we need more sunlight than anyone. So if you're darker complected like myself, have more melanin in your skin, you need more sun because you are sun people. It's important that you know and understand that. Now, let's quickly jump into the importance of vitamin D in and of itself. Now, the first things first, what most people don't know about vitamin D is actually really not a vitamin, it's more of a hormone, okay? And let me explain the difference between the two. A vitamin is needed for cell function, cell growth, and development, okay? A vitamin, for example, would be vitamin A, which is the first vitamin discovered, and then you probably could guess the second vitamin discovered was vitamin B, and then C, and then D, okay? Now, vitamins are different from minerals, okay? Minerals will be an example of potassium, magnesium, calcium, phosphorus. Those are minerals, okay? Vitamins are essentially vital minerals, okay? And so it's important for us to make that distinction first. So that's what a vitamin is. A hormone, in contrast, is a chemical messenger, okay? A hormone is often made in a gland, and then that hormone, or it either is made and then goes to a gland, and then once it goes to that gland, it tells that gland or tells an organ something to do. It's a messenger. So it goes, like for instance, thyroid stimulating hormone goes to the thyroid and stimulates the thyroid, okay? So it's important to know and understand there's this distinction between the two. But vitamin D is a little bit more complicated than that, because our primary way we're supposed to get our vitamin D is through the sun, okay? And the beautiful thing about that is the same way that our home could have solar panels, okay? And then the light, the UV light hits the solar panels and can create energy for the entire home. Well, guess what? We have that same way with plants. We have that same function too, because when the sunlight hits our skin, it interacts with our skin and magnesium and creates a compound known as cholecalciferol. Okay, now the reason why that's important is because that form of vitamin D isn't active. It is not active. Okay, it cannot have the essential functions or create the essential functions that the active form of vitamin D can. Now, the reason why that is so important is because it has to become activated. And this is where we're getting into the importance of vitamin D. Now, once it becomes active, before it becomes active, it has to go to the liver first, okay? And the liver converts it, okay? The liver will convert it into calcifidiol, okay? Calcifidiol, all right? Now, the reason why that's important, because now that the liver has converted, it still has to be converted again to become active. Where does it become converted again? In the kidneys, okay? Now it becomes calcifitriol, okay? Now, once it becomes calcifitriol, now it is the active form of vitamin D that can now do its thing. The reason why that's so important is because if you don't have good liver function and kidney function, you cannot convert the sunlight that you're getting from the sun into the active form. This is what a lot of people don't talk about. And this is why it's so important that I'm mentioning, as I mentioned before, the deficiencies can cause disease, but also toxicity as well, too. Because if you're consuming the standard American diet, 70% processed food, which means chemicals, which means toxins, it means that your liver is going to have to deal with 70% of your diet being toxins, okay? Which means that your liver is going to become overburdened, okay? So now your liver may lose the function to convert that inactive form of vitamin D to the second form of vitamin D, okay? What's also important is the kidneys. One of the primary sort of jobs of the kidneys is to remove acidity from the body, okay? We call it urine, okay? But urine is uric acid, okay? So one of the primary jobs of the kidney is remove acid from the body, all right? But guess what? One in three adults pretty much have kidney disease, okay? It's very prevalent today. And as a result, we don't have kidney function. Well, guess what? The kidney function that we need, the unfortunate thing is that now you can't convert your vitamin D. Even if you got enough sunlight, you can't convert it to that active form. Okay, so it's also so important we realize that it's a lifestyle. Even if you're getting the sunlight, but your kidneys and your liver are saturated with toxins, you can't convert it to the active form, all right? And this is why so many people are burdened with vitamin D deficiency. As a matter of fact, the general population, it's about 42% of the general population who has vitamin D deficiency. But when you start to look at the African-American community, it's around about 75 to 80% of African-American people of color have a deficiency in vitamin D. And I'm going to get into in just a second the important function of vitamin D, because it's not just the bones. And that's what people miss a lot. People are under the impression, I need vitamin D for the bones. That's one of them, but there is a vitamin D receptor in over 400 tissues in our bodies. Okay, and it's also highly concentrated in the brain, in the heart, and the immune system. Okay, so when you become vitamin D deficient, all of these other areas become deficient as well too. So it's so important that we know and understand that we have to get our vitamin D levels up, because we have evolved as human beings to have sunlight and to have vitamin D in our bodies at not only sufficient levels, but at, therapeutic levels. So let's talk about what are those levels, okay, that your vitamin D is deficient. Well, less than 20 nanograms per milliliter, you're going to be deficient, okay? I'll tell you, I commonly see people who have vitamin D levels that are 10, 13, 8. I've even worked with somebody who had a vitamin D level that was non-existent. It didn't show up, okay? And when I tell you, you have a vitamin D deficiency, it could cause so many issues that we're going to get into in just a second with these signs and symptoms. It's very important, when your vitamin D levels are low, you have to get that under control, because it could be causing all of the other issues. So deficiency is less than 20, okay? Sufficient, okay? Sufficient. Let me give you a definition of sufficient, okay? Sufficient means that if you're hungry, I give you a couple of leaves of salad, okay? Now, it's sufficient. It gave you some nourishment, but it didn't take care of your hunger. It didn't take care of all the vitamins and minerals that you need in your body. It's important to know that sufficient for me is really below average. That's what it says, okay? So sufficient is 30, okay? So when your level is 30 nanograms per milliliter, that's sufficient. But you want to be super therapeutic, okay? Super therapeutic, you want to be between 40 and 60. That's what you want your vitamin D levels to be. Because at super therapeutic, 40 to 60, what you're going to experience is the full benefits of the vitamin D hormone, okay? So hugely important. And to give you an example, when we look at lifeguards who spend a lot of time outside in the sun, or farmers, commonly their vitamin D levels are between 50 and 60, okay? All right, and that's essentially how we're supposed to be spending our time as human beings, getting, sunlight and getting our vitamin D levels to that level. So that is the goal, okay? The goal is to be between 40 and 60, okay? And for a lot of people, again, I won't go, it's another video where I kind of go into how you correct vitamin D, of course, with the sun, especially for people who have challenges with it. But it's just really important for us to know and understand. You have to correct this, all right? So let's get into those seven signs and symptoms that you have, vitamin D deficiency. Number one, a weakened immune system. Okay, why is that? Because vitamin D, as I told you, is a hormone, but it has so many other functions in the body. And one of those functions is essentially an immune modulator. It modulates the immune system. The best way to explain it is that it's essentially like having a joystick for the immune system to control it. Now, imagine if you were playing one of these game consoles and you didn't have a joystick, okay? And you were playing one game, NBA 2K, another game you were playing Black Ops, and guess what? You didn't have a joystick control, okay? You wouldn't be very successful, would you? Okay, it's the same thing with our immune system. If you don't have a sufficient level of vitamin D, you won't be able to modulate the immune system. Let me give you an example, a couple of examples of what I mean by that. It regulates cytokines. Now, if you're familiar with that word cytokine, we heard a lot about that during the pandemic. Well, cytokines is really what caused people to have a severe reaction to C19, but it's also what caused people to have a fatal experience with C19 as well too, because I always tell people, People didn't die of the infection. What they died from was the inflammation. Okay. And the inflammation was coming from the immune system responding to the actual virus. Okay. All right. So the inflammation was being created by the immune system because it didn't have the joystick. And we found that, and there's plenty of studies that can confirm it, that during the pandemic, those who had vitamin D levels that were deficient were those who, or for the majority's sake, had the severe reaction and the fatal reaction. So we learned that just recently during the pandemic. So that tells us one thing. The other thing is the vitamin D. Vitamin D is also highly critical for what are called natural killer cells. Okay. And they are what they sound like. These natural killer cells go after bacteria, viruses, and they're naturally killing this bacteria and viruses, and they're developed in your body. Well, guess what? If you don't have sufficient vitamin D levels, you won't activate those natural killer cells. Okay. Also, candida overgrowth. When candida starts overgrowing in your body, yeast, it's probably because you're not having your immune system modulated to take care of that yeast. Even viral infections, I can go on, but commonly with these type of people, you're going to see flus and colds happening all the time because they have a weakened immune system. Number 2, lower back pain. And why is that? Because vitamin D is also anti-inflammatory. Okay, it's anti-inflammatory. So whenever you have deficient levels of vitamin D, your body is going to be in pain, specifically in your lower back. And we'll talk about some other areas in a second, but lower back pain is also a sign of vitamin D deficiency. Okay. Number 3, high blood pressure. High blood pressure. Yes. And let me explain why. Vitamin D also acts like an ACE inhibitor. And if that sounds familiar, ACE inhibitors are one of the most popular drugs given out when somebody has high blood pressure. Okay. And an ACE inhibitor, although it is known as a drug, we have natural ACE inhibitors in our body. Okay. We lose that function. And guess why we lose that function? Quite often because we're vitamin D deficient. So ACE inhibitors are things like lisinopril, captopril. These are common drugs that are used to treat high blood pressure. And guess what? Vitamin D acts like an ACE inhibitor, which is hugely important. And the other thing that's really important around vitamin D deficiency, when you get a deficiency, it is going to lead to arterial stiffness. And what that means is your arteries are going to be more and more stiff. Okay. And why is that? Because vitamin D also, and we'll talk about this later, controls calcium. Okay. Now, what's really important to know about calcium, 99% of calcium is in the bones. Okay. So it's the makeup of your bones and teeth. Okay. If you don't have vitamin D, it doesn't act to absorb the calcium into the bone. So it could be in the blood, which could end up in the arteries and the blood vessels. And when that calcium starts to build up in the arteries, it causes it to stiffen. Okay. So that's number 3. That's how it can cause high blood pressure. So you literally could be suffering from high blood pressure as a result of your deficiency in vitamin D. Number 4, elevated blood sugars and insulin resistance. And you're probably thinking, like, how does vitamin D have anything to do with my diabetes or my pre-diabetes? Well, because it's vitamin D is involved in the function of pancreatic beta cells. Okay, what are those? The beta cells in the pancreas are responsible for releasing insulin. What does insulin do? Insulin is like the chaperone. It takes all the sugar, the blood sugar, and then it squirts it into muscle cells. Okay? So it's essentially like a taxi cab to the muscle cell. It takes the sugar from the blood, puts it inside of the muscles where it then can be used for energy. Because that sugar stays in the blood, it's going to accumulate, get higher and higher, become known as initially pre-diabetes, eventually diabetes, and elevated blood sugars can also lead to elevated blood pressure, which could also lead to a stroke. Okay. So when you're vitamin D deficient, guess what? It's not properly regulating those beta cells that are in your pancreas. as well too. So that's number 4. Number 5, depression. Okay, deficiency in vitamin D could also cause mood swings like depression. And why is that? Well, vitamin D deficiency is key for converting tryptophan into serotonin. Okay, why is that important? All right, so if you know somebody with depression, they quite often give them a drug known as a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. What is that? One of the drugs is commonly referred to as Zoloft. Okay, serotonin is the happy molecule. Okay, the more of it you have, the happier you will be. Okay, now tryptophan has to be converted into serotonin. So if you don't have vitamin D, you don't get that conversion. It can lead to depression as well too. Are you seeing how complicated one deficiency could ruin your life? Give you diabetes, give you hypertension, make you depressed, give you pain in your lower back, have a weak immune system, and we're just at number 5, okay? Number 6, fatigue, okay? Problems with sleeping as well too. When you wake up, you will feel tired. And why is that? Because vitamin D is critical from a mitochondrial function. And what I mean by that, it decreases the function of the mitochondria, and the mitochondria essentially is a powerhouse for creating energy. Okay, so that's why it makes you fatigued. That's why it makes you feel tired when you wake up in the morning too. So add that to the list. Now you're tired also. And then number 7, autoimmune conditions. Autoimmune conditions. Yeah, so things like lupus, MS, multiple sclerosis, possibly even Hashimoto's. And why is that? Why can vitamin D cause you to have an autoimmune condition? Well, let's first look at what is autoimmune conditions. Auto meaning self, immune, okay? That means that the immune system is attacking itself, okay? So if it's lupus, it's attacking you in the blood. If it's multiple sclerosis, it's attacking your nervous system, okay? Where it attacks you makes no difference, okay? It makes a difference in terms of what you experience, but essentially the cause is the immune system gone haywire. And what did I say earlier? Let me get a quick swig of my green juice. What did I say earlier about the immune system and vitamin D? It's a modulator. It's the control. It's a joystick. It's the joystick for the immune system. So if you don't have that joystick, you can't control the immune system not knowing that it's attacking its own self. Okay, so this is why vitamin D, correcting your vitamin D is so essential, okay? And the other really important part when it comes to autoimmune conditions is this. Every autoimmune condition, just think about it. Somebody with multiple sclerosis, somebody with Hashimoto's, somebody with lupus, they're all experiencing inflammation. Also, what did I say about vitamin D? It is a potent anti-inflammatory. So you see, and I'll get into this in just a second, as you can see, a vitamin D deficiency, it started with deficiency, but it's also coupled with toxicity. Okay, so it's so important that we know and understand that quite often, you're treating your autoimmune condition with all of these anti-inflammatories, which quite often don't work very well at all. Most of the treatments for autoimmune conditions do not work very well at all. And they have a lot of side effects, a lot of painful and sometimes fatal side effects, because you're addressing the symptoms and not the cause, okay? And then the last bonus I'll give you for a sign and symptom of vitamin D deficiency is going to be weakened bones, okay? And why are the bones weak? Because vitamin D plays a role in the absorption of calcium. 99% of the calcium in your body is in your bones and teeth. And when you don't have that vitamin D level there, it's not going to be absorbed into the bones and teeth. And as a result, the bones are going to become brittle. And then also, you're going to have a problem with gaining muscle. And you're also going to have a problem with also gaining weight and it making you overweight as well, too. So those are the 7, with a couple of bonuses, the 7 signs that you have a vitamin D deficiency. Okay. Now, sometimes you can have a deficiency. You go into your doctor and the level will say 35 and you will think that it's normal, but it's important that you know that there's a vitamin D receptor. And if your vitamin D isn't hitting those receptors, that's an issue. But also remember what I mentioned before. If you have liver and kidney problems, you will not convert that inactive form of vitamin D to the active form. No matter how much you take, no matter how much sun you get, if you have toxicity in your kidneys and your liver, you will not be able to convert it to the active form. And this is why I do my detox every 3 to 4 months, because I'm getting rid of all these toxins that are in the water, that are in the food, that are in the air, that are in household products, that are in furniture, that are in all of the cosmetic and hygiene products, all of that from years and years of me eating that before I changed my lifestyle. I'm constantly getting that out of my body, which means that I'm cleaning out all of the detoxification organs and I'm opening up all of the elimination pathways, okay? Remember, toxicity and deficiency, those are the primary causes of disease for most people today. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Make sure you like, subscribe, all that good stuff, share, and give me some comments below if you've been struggling with vitamin D or you know somebody who has, or if you're just simply enjoying the content, you tried the detox and it went really well for you. I love hearing your guys' feedback in the comments, so make sure you comment below. Until the next time, peace and blessings and Godspeed.